Hey guys, welcome to the shop. In the shop, on the shaper, I've got the rotary table and I've got our slug of aluminum that we're going to use as a test piece, or just a sacrificial piece, to test our spacing of our lines that we want to scribe for the indexing angle plate, the depth of the line, several different things. So let's go in the shop and see if we can figure out what's going to work best for this angle plate. Alright guys, in the rotary table on the shaper here, I've got a slug of aluminum. Now this slug of aluminum is one that I showed in one of the previous videos that fit the back of the angle plate that we're building really well. You know, aluminum is pretty easy to work with, so that's why I kind of chose to do this on this piece of aluminum. If I mess it up, I can always come in with the shaper and face it off again, you know, and you know, try something else. That's the plan. It's looking to me, just by turning this and seeing the spacing on you know, this diameter of a piece, that the best I'm going to get is probably about, you know, every 2 degrees. I think anything more than that will be, you know, too close. And I'm not for sure on the depth of cut either. You know, I haven't done it at all yet. So, you know, you're going to get to see, you know, my first attempts. I've got a 60-degree cutter here, and the way that I squared this cutter up, or, you know, made sure that this cutter was coming straight down on the work, is I just used my little fishtail gauge here, set it on the surface of the work, and then, you know, just like you would if you were lining a, you know, 60-degree cutter up to cut on the milling machine to cut some threads. Same thing on this. Now I had come in before the video and I had faced this, you know, just so I've got one good solid surface, you know, that's parallel, you know, with the ram. So I'm not cutting deeper on one side than I will on the other. And I'm not necessarily going to scribe all the way around this thing. You know, this is just a test piece to see. I don't know how deep I'm going to, you know, cut, where we'll all start, you know, together and see what it looks like, and we'll go from there, even on the spacing. So I'm going to bring you in a little closer, get you an over shot to where you can see what it looks like real well, and we'll practice together. So let's get started. Alright, I got you in tight here, and I've made a line a 1/4 inch from this outside edge to this line is a 1/4 inch. That's about where I want all the short lines to be. And probably every 5 to 10 degrees, I'm going to make a longer line. But the first thing that I'm going to do, if this was my final piece, I'm going to make just a row of short lines. Then I would set the shaper up to scribe a longer line, and then I would come back and do the longer lines. That way I don't have to change the stroke, and I get them all the same length and stuff. I don't even know how deep I'm going to go yet. We'll see. But I got the shaper set up real slow. All I wanted to do is come in and make a line, and that's it. So we're going to start off at 2.5 degrees and see what that looks like, and we'll go from there. So let's get started, and we'll zero this cutter. Call that 0. And we'll dial in at about 5 probably. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay. Burr pops off real easy on this aluminum. I'm going to unlock the rotary table and dial in 2.5. Lock it and try again. and so on. Really working really well. About 5 thousandths deep. I'm going to try to go just 1 degree and see what that looks like. I think I can get away with that. Pretty neat. I really didn't think that 1 degree would be spaced enough, but it looks like if we, with this cutter, if we go down basically 5 to 6 thousandths, then we'll have proper spacing, especially if we add some color to that back plate so we can see the lines well. Alright guys, I'm going to interrupt your regularly scheduled machining content for a new tool update. My dad picked this up, and this is a big Brown & Sharp, and I believe it's a 731, and it's a big indicator stand. He picked this up at a flea market basically. There was $10 on it, and he bought it. He didn't even know what it was, but he knew that it looked somewhat precise, and he picked it up. So I got this for $10. This is a really nice piece. It could use some work. It's got some surface rust on it, but I checked it with the tenths indicator, and we're within a couple tenths no matter where you measure. So it's still even, I'm sure this guy is probably, 50 years old at least. After all that time, this guy is still in, pretty good shape. It's got some surface rust on some of the handles and stuff, and it had a light layer of rust on this, and I just cleaned it up a little. And it's heavy duty, that's for sure. The rods are in pretty decent shape. They're not perfect, but it's good enough. It's got a little Federal 0.01 millimeter indicator on it with a big flat bottom, a button bottom. The movement is really nice on it. This guy is heavy duty, and I'm more than happy with it. I think that it's definitely worth more than $10, but that's what the price was on it, and that's what I got it for. I think this guy, it definitely needs a bigger surface plate than what I got, but and in the future I'm going to get one. But this thing is, T-slotted all the way down on both the top and the bottom. Both. And putting it on the plate here and moving it around, I can see right now that, this is, keep in mind, this is 10 inches long and 3 inches wide. This is a pretty big piece. And I can see that it's bowed, slightly banana, but it's not bad. I mean, within a couple tenths. It's got a couple tenths bow in the top, and that, is the opposite on the other side. So you can see it's when I rotate it here by hand, you can see that it's rotating. The pivot point is right around the center, and that's, telling me that it's bowed, and that's where it's touching the plate more than anywhere else, is right in the center. And if I flip this guy over, and then I pivot it on the plate, you can see it's pivoting here and here. Something on the plate. But, you know, even though it's not perfect, and it's seen better days as far as finish, it's a good piece. A really good piece. A good addition to the shop that I'm really happy to have. It's not all beat up. It does have some scuffs and stuff on it, so little bitty marks. I lightly stoned it to knock off all the, you know, really high spots. And it being T-slotted, you know, on both sides allows me to, you know, I could put a fence on this end to where I could ride on the edge of the stone if I wanted to, you know, indicate something, you know, and move in a straight line with the indicator. There's a lot of things you could do with a big, you know, surface gauge like this, and that's what I'm going to call it, as a surface gauge. Really, I believe they call it an indicator stand, but it's more of a surface plate guy. You know, you wouldn't use this unless you're working on big dies or something, in a big tool and die shop. But that's just a guess. But you know, really, for me, it's going to be a surface plate gauge, and I may come in here and scrape this guy flat. I'm not for sure. But I also may take it over to old Brian Block and take him up on his offer that he gave to me about the surface grinder. Now, me and Brian Block got along real well, and if you don't know Brian Block, I suggest you go check him out. It's BCBOLC02 on YouTube, and I'll put a link down below. The guy's got some amazing equipment, and I'm talking on a huge scale. Most of you probably already know who I'm talking about, but for those who don't, go check him out, Brian Block, and he's on YouTube, and he has some massive equipment. And he lives right up the road from me, about 20 minutes away, and that's great. So I may take this over to old Brian's house, put it on his big old grinder, give you a little tour of his shop, and bring this thing in a little closer. See if we can get it, you know, tighter than what it is. It may end up having to be scraped. 2/10 is pretty tight anyway, but we can get it closer than that. So, a new tool I'm glad to have. I'm glad I got to share it with you. You know, I'm really pleased with the setup as far as the arm and stuff on this thing. I mean, it is robust. You know, it's everything still works really well. It's really solid lockup. So there it is, the Brown & Sharp. I believe it's a 731. Flea market find, $10. Can't beat that. Sometimes you get lucky, but and I think I did. Yeah. So I want to show you what my plans are for the indexing on the angle plate. I really think that you know, 1 degree looks fine. You know, you've seen it on the spacing. I've got this block of steel here, and this is what I'm going to probably make the back plate out of. And I'm not for sure if I want to try to, you know, trepan this out with a trepanning tool. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, you know, it's a pretty neat and somewhat sketchy operation where you just bring a cutting tool in. You know, this is spinning in the lathe. You bring a cutting tool in and remove the, you know, the piece you want without removing all the excess material around it. Good way to save material, you know, when you're dealing with expensive materials that you don't want to lose. But it's also a good practice for those, you know, who, you know, if you want to even use it on steel, you know, it's a good method to remove a piece without having to remove huge amounts of material. And we may try it. You know, I haven't done a lot of it, so it may be interesting. So let's go put this on the lathe and give it a shot. Alright guys, here's our test piece. I've determined that I can tell the difference in 1 degree marks, and they're not too close together. And I think it's going to work out just fine. This is just the test piece. I've got the piece that I'm going to make this back plate for this. This is our angle plate in the back. We've got a small step here. This is the plate that I'm going to make it out of. And I've got a hole drilled in the center of this plate already. I've got this T-nut here, and this is threaded 5/8 18. And my plan is And there's probably more elegant ways to do this, but I think this is fairly simple. Just to, have my hole drilled, thread the back of the slug, that way this T-nut will lock this ring to the back. Plus I can loosen it, zero it, wherever, no matter where my work is, I want to be able to turn this ring and zero it. Then I can come in and lock this down, and hopefully it'll be adequate enough to hold it stationary. That's the plan. So first thing I got to do is skim this plate on the lathe, and then I got to make my step because we got a small recess here, and then I'm going to try to trepan out a ring out of this piece of material. Now I'm no trepanning expert, so I'm going to trepan it on the large side, and then I'll come back and clean it up to the size that I want later, because who knows how that trepanning will work out. But we'll see. So I'm going to get you a better angle up high, and we can get started. Alright guys, I'm going to come in and just face this, and then I got to come in and I'm going to make this inner ring. I need to stop, and make this inner ring about 4.9 inches. This is not that critical. It needs to be anywhere around 4.9 to 4.910. So that's what I'm going to do. Come in, face it, make the inner ring, and I need to go about 200 thousandths deep, and then we'll work on the trepanning. Not a horrible finish. Pretty good down here where we want it to be good, so that's fine. So now I need to work on my inner ring. Let's start out. About 10, and I'll bring you back when I get something working here, and then we'll go from there. Alright guys, now we've been working this back and forth. I've got a tool in here that resembles a parting tool, and I've just been plunging in and cutting across. I ground it to where I cut right to left with it, but I can still plunge with it, and that's how I've worked this ring. Now this ring is still slightly big. It's about probably 70 thousandths big. Then I'll come in with a hard right angle tool and plunge this to make this final dimension. Now this should have been done with the rotary table on the milling machine, but I'm not moving that big rotary table over to the milling machine. It's already on the shaper, and I like to practice different methods, even though this isn't the ideal method. This still works, and if you didn't have a milling machine, you can do it this way. This is a good way to get circles if you don't have a rotary table and a milling machine. So we're going to run in, And then we're going to flip the tool and then we'll size this ring. So this is kind of slow. We know we're a little big, so we can come in a little bit. Touch. Run this in. This will give us a good square 90 degrees to the face we just cut. Get a measurement, find my calipers, so we need to come off about 70 thousandths. Let's try that. Make a couple cuts. 50. Alright, 4.9. The index is about, or the hole is about 410, so it'll give us about 10 thousandths clearance. Should be good. Now I'm going to set up for trepanning, and I'll bring you back. Alright guys, I'm going to attempt to trepan this off, and I'm going to trepan it off a little larger than what I need, because I don't know how this is going to go, and, you know, I want to be able to clean it up, so here we go. way on the large side. Oh yeah. That's actually going pretty well. I am going to reduce my diameter to something just going about 200 thousandths. We got so much to take off. Again, always better to plenty. Always better to measure twice and cut once. Pause for a second. Bring that tailstock in. That way this piece don't fall on the floor. Hopefully that doesn't block your view. operation, but it works. Well guys, turned out really nice. Tom Lipton does a really good video on, the trepanning tool. And, I've done this several times, but sometimes it's a little sketchy. But it worked out really well. This is mild steel, and it's a little, gummy and kind of hard to part. And it's really important. The grinding of the tool is real critical because it needs clearance in order to go in, and it all depends on the radius of the, the diameter of the, round you're cutting. The smaller, the round, the smaller the tool has to be in order to clear. So let's take this over to the bench and look at it. I'll pull this tool off and we'll talk about it. Well guys, that went pretty well. I'm actually really pleased with that. This piece came out great. Here's our waist. Here's our ring. The finish is not perfect on it, but I'm happy with that. Just test fit it up here, and just got, we left about 5 to 8 thousandths clearance so it can rotate. We still got to, machine the outer diameter. I should have really just trepanned it to size, but I'm no expert at trepanning. I admit that, and but I can chuck this up in the lathe and turn it to the size I want, and be confident that I won't mess it up. So the finish turned out on the trepanning, the slug, just as good as the, this regular, turning finish. Like I said before, Tom Lipton does a really good video explaining, the function of our trepanning tool and the clearances that's needed. I've watched his video in the past, it's not that old of a video. And I had done trepanning before that, but he does a really good job of explaining it. And also, I've got a really good book here. I've got several good books that go into trepanning and whatnot. And this is Metal's Handbook. This is Volume 3, Machining, 8th edition. A really great book. It goes into all kinds of good stuff, shaping and planing and milling and you name it. This is a great book that goes into really good detail. So I'm really happy with that. I mean, I don't think it could have turned out any better. I'm a little questioning my judgment on using just one big screw, but I think it'll work out. I think it'll hold that stationary and reliably, hopefully. That's the plan anyway. And then hopefully next week we can get some lines on here, because if you guys want a video this week, I better get this done. I gotta do some editing. So there we go. We got our slug. We machined it all out. We trepanned it. We went over new tools. We practiced our index lines on the shaper. So I'm really happy with it, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't, like and subscribe. Make sure to hit my little guy up here and hit the bell for notifications, because we do our best to get the videos up, but we're not quite on a great schedule. So I really appreciate you watching, and tell your friends, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.